Ladies and gentlemen, hello. It is an absolute pleasure to be with you in person this afternoon. And hello to all those watching online too. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Justin Springham. I'm the publisher of Mobile World Live, and I will be your moderator for this very special keynote session. This is the big one, right? The keynote we've all been waiting for at MWC 21. This year seems particularly appropriate to welcome Elon Musk to MWC. After defying all conventions in the banking industry, the auto industry, and the aerospace industry, markets many felt were impossible to transform, Elon Musk now plans to do the same with the connectivity industry. SpaceX is leveraging its experience in building rockets and spacecraft, aiming to launch the world's most advanced broadband internet system. Please welcome Mr. Elon Musk. Elon, it is great to see you. A very warm welcome from MWC. I would also like to start, Elon, by wishing you, on behalf of everyone here at MWC, a very happy and somewhat belated 50th birthday. Happy birthday for yesterday, Elon.
Thank you.
Elon, we're going to talk, obviously, about SpaceX, the wider goals for SpaceX. Before we do that, I would love to focus on Starlink. Now, this is a plan to provide the world with broadband coverage via satellites. You've actually compared the project to rebuilding the internet in space. You're an engineer at heart, Elon. What has driven you to take on this new challenge?
Well, there's a need for connectivity in places that don't have it right now, or where it is connectivity is very limited or very expensive. But at many parts of the world, like I said, that's simply not available. So you can think of Starlink as filling in the gaps between 5G and fiber, and really getting to the parts of the world that are the hardest to reach, the most difficult to reach. 3%, possibly 5%. And I think it really quite nicely complements fiber and 5G.
Nice complementary technology, you're saying, and we'll dive a bit deeper into that. Elon, first of all, give us a bit of a kind of high-level overview as to how far progressed Starlink actually is. What have you done so far?
So we've launched and now have active over 1,500 satellites. Let's see, there are a few interesting stats. The combined power of all the satellites is over 5 megawatts. So there's over 5 megawatts of solar from all the satellites combined. They're capable of outputting about 30 terabits per second of data, and starting in actually next month, almost next month, I should say. Starting in August, we should have global connectivity for everywhere except the poles. Now, as I said, it's really meant for sparsely populated regions. So because our spot size, talking in terms of cellular, is quite big. So we're well suited to low to medium density areas, but not to high density areas. In the high density areas, we will be able to serve a limited number of customers. But it is operational. We recently passed the strategically notable number of 69,420 active users. And we're, I think, on our way to having a few 100,000 users, possibly over 500,000 users within 12 months. So I think it's growing rapidly, and we're continuing to innovate the user terminal and the satellite and the ground stations and sort of gateways and points of presence. I think we're operational now in about 12 countries, and more being added every month. So it's like I said, it's a nice complement to fiber and to 5G, and it's also although we can't talk about those deals today because our partner's not ready to announce them. I think it can be quite useful to a lot of telcos for data backhaul. So just if people have cellular stations in remote regions, using Starlink for data backhaul to their network can be a very cost-effective way of doing data backhaul. And then notably for Starlink, relative to, say, other satellite communication systems, we are at around 500 kilometers, whereas the geosynchronous satellites are around 36,000 kilometers. So latency for a Starlink system is similar to latency for ground-based fiber and 5G. So we're expecting to get latency down under 20 milliseconds. So you can still do, it feels very fast, like there's no lag. And you can play, for example, competitive video games on a Starlink system.
This is a very tough market, Elon. I mean, if we look back over the last couple of decades, it has been littered with failure. We go as far back as the 1990s. There are big names that no longer are with us. They've tried to make satellite broadband a success. You've also now got strong competition. The likes of Amazon and OneWeb are also now attempting to launch new satellite broadband projects. What is it that makes Starlink different to what's gone on in decades beforehand, Elon, but also with your new competition as well? What is it that makes you different?
Yes. Well, when I gave a talk a few years ago about Starlink, I was asked for what's my goal for Starlink, and I said, well, our goal is not to go bankrupt. Because as you point out, every other low Earth orbit communications constellation ever done has gone bankrupt. Now, some of them have emerged from bankruptcy, but let's just say the original owners did not benefit from those constellations. So, they've either gone bankrupt after. Most of them went bankrupt before even deploying their constellation fully, and even the ones that did deploy their constellation, they still went bankrupt. Now they did subsequently emerge from bankruptcy, but and obviously companies like Iridium and Orbcomm are doing reasonably well today, but not for the original owners. So step number one for Starlink is don't go bankrupt. That is, and then if we succeed in not going bankrupt, then that'll be great, and we can move on from there. But I do think from a technology standpoint, Starlink is quite different from prior LEO constellations in that the technology that we're deploying is very advanced. What happens often with space-based technology, somewhat ironically, is that it tends to be older technology that exists on the ground. So the companies generally have been very conservative, so they've said, well, we want technology that's proven to work on the ground, and then we have to test it for years to make sure it's going to work in the vacuum of space with a higher radiation load and that kind of thing. And so the technology that's generally been launched into orbit has been older technology. And we took the opposite approach and said, we're going to make technology that is in some ways at least, more advanced than what is on the ground, and we're just going to take a chance. And so we have what's probably fair to say are the most sophisticated, but the most advanced phased array technologies to the best of knowledge, no one has. Not even at sort of military level has this level of sophistication with phased array technology, and I think that's sort of quite important for a fast-moving LEO constellation, because the terminal, which is a user terminal that is also phased array, and the terminal on these, and the terminal on the satellite, the antenna on the satellite, they're both phased array. So you can switch from one satellite that's moving rapidly overhead to another one, and do so at the microsecond level. So there's no, you can't tell as the system is switching over from one satellite to another. There's no change in latency or jitter from one satellite to another. And a single satellite can illuminate many different user cell spots on the ground. So, and it's a digital phased array system. So we can continue to program and reprogram the system to greater efficiency because it is digital. So, like I said, to the best of our knowledge, it is the most advanced phased array system in the world. So that's pretty cool. We also have an advantage of a launch system that is capable of a very high launch rate and capable of putting a lot of mass to orbit. I believe last year, SpaceX delivered about 2/3 of all payload to orbit. And this year, we may deliver closer to 80% of all payload to orbit of Earth. Just with that, so, and of the remaining, of course, it remains to be seen for this year if we actually put close to 80% of all payload to orbit. But of the remaining, let's say roughly 20%, about 12% would be China or thereabouts, and then 8% is everyone else. So the sheer mass to orbit capability of the Falcon 9 rocket is, because it is a reusable booster and the fairing is reusable, so we only have to make the upper stage, that has never existed before, and the cost of mass to orbit also is the lowest it has ever been. So because of reusability, so this is the two work together quite well. But it has been quite an adventure learning how to make these advanced satellites and learning how to make so many of them, and the user terminal and the gateway. And the satellites, for example, use a SpaceX developed Krypton Hall effect thruster, which basically shoots out high-speed ions of Krypton. It's kind of cool. Superman, watch out for our satellites, don't go close to them. It's all like Krypton. Just in general, it's quite a clever satellite. And then we're getting close to launching satellite 1.5, which has laser intersatellite links. And that'll be used especially for continuous connectivity over the Arctic and Antarctic regions, or basically the high polar regions, the high latitude regions. And then next year we'll start launching version 2 of our satellite, which will be significantly more capable. And then all satellites from 1.5 onwards will have intersatellite links. And then we'll start getting our gateways and our points of presence to really directly to the major server centers. So the data really goes directly from user terminal directly to the server center. So if somebody's using YouTube or Netflix or Google search or Xbox, whatever the case may be, Amazon Web Services, the data flows in the shortest path possible, thus minimizing latency and jitter. So even if big chunks of the internet go down, then you still have connectivity. So we're pretty excited about the future. It's looking, we're getting overconfident, but it's looking quite positive. And like I said, it serves as a great natural complement to major telco, fiber, and 5G.
Talk us through, if you can, Elon, the finances of this huge project. How much are you investing in Starlink? How much are you prepared to invest in Starlink?
Well, I think it depends on how you count investment. It's sort of what's the total. I mean, one way to count investment is like what's the total amount of money invested before Starlink becomes positive cash flow, and then how much of that do you include Falcon 9 and everything we've done there? I think probably before we go to fully positive cash flow, it'll be at least $5 billion, and maybe as much as 10. So it's quite a lot. Mm-hmm. And then if you say like, well, how much are we going to invest even after it goes positive cash flow? I think we'll have to keep investing a great deal after that point in order to not be made irrelevant by continued improvements in cellular and continued extensions in cellular, or lower cost geosynchronous satellites, which geosynchronous satellites can serve a very large swath of territory, but the total bandwidth they can serve is not that great, and the latency is high. But still, we need to be able to offer our service at a comparable or ideally lower rate than GTO satellite connectivity. So it's basically total investment probably is like at least $5, maybe $10 billion, and then over time it's going to be some multiple of that. I don't know, it could be 20 or 30 billion over time. There's a lot, basically.
Yep. It is a lot of money. And to recoup that investment, obviously, you need customers and subscribers, Elon. Just in terms of the basics, to get myself set up with a Starlink dish, and that's going to cost me, what, about $500 approximately to get started? And then how much would the monthly subscriptions be?
Yeah, so right now, we're basically, it's like $500 to order a dish, and it's about the same. It's the same price everywhere in the world. The only thing that changes from one country to the next is our taxes and import duties. So it's the same price everywhere in the world. We're taking into account sort of exchange rates and import duties and transport and stuff like that. So, and then it's $100 a month. I mean, to be totally frank, we are losing money on that terminal right now. That terminal costs us more than $1,000. So we obviously are subsidizing the cost of the terminal. Now we are working on sort of next generation terminals that provide the same level of capability, roughly the same level of capability, but costs a lot less. So that's one area of development for us. Because obviously selling terminals for half price is not super compelling at scale. Do millions of that, that's tricky. And over time, we would like to reduce the terminal cost from $500 to, I don't know, $300 or $250 or something like that. We do make it very easy to install. So because we knew that our customers would be all over the world, often in very remote regions, and regions where so some people have installed their Starlink terminal on a cabin high up in a mountain that doesn't even have electricity, or it's got like solar panels or something. It's like not even connected to the grid. So it's like, okay, we'll have like a mountain climber or something to go install that if it needed a professional installer. So we designed our system to not need a professional installer. You can literally take it out of the box and within less than 5 minutes have connectivity. So the instructions are just two instructions, which is point the terminal at the sky and plug it in. And you can do that in either order. It doesn't matter. You can plug it in and then point it at the sky, or point at the sky and then plug it in. It's like pretty easy. So anyone can basically make it work, and does not need a professional installer.
Elon, you've got the mobile industry watching you today. I'm sure when they came into the room or they started watching this, wondering what impact Starlink was going to have on their business, they probably wondered whether you were friend or foe. You started off by talking about how you can be complementary to 5G and fiber as well. Wondering if you see any potential for partnerships with mobile operators. Is this something you can work together on?
Yeah, in fact, so we have two quite significant partnerships that with major country telcos that I'd like to be able to announce now, but we obviously defer to our partners to make any announcement. And we are in discussions with a number of other telcos also to provide Starlink access. And this is, like I said, this is helpful for backhaul. It's also helpful because a number of countries have requirements that in order to receive a 5G license, that you have to provide rural coverage. And in a lot of cases, the rural coverage does not make, it's very difficult to make the economic case for rural coverage. So effectively, the urban customers end up subsidizing the rural customers, sometimes to a very, very significant degree. And so in some cases, just like, well, can you just take care of the kind of the rural customers that are required by our 5G license? And then we're like, sure, we'll do that. And it's the most, like I said, it's usually the most difficult to serve 3 to 5% of the customer base. Yep. So those are the two sort of deals that we're doing are you know, where a 5G licensee has rural serving requirements set by the government, and in some cases where they do have 5G cell towers, but the difficulty is achieving backhaul.
Well, Elon, we will keep a very close eye on the identity of those two operators. Let's take the conversation a little bit wider, Elon. Obviously, SpaceX is relatively new to the satellite space, but you are not new to operating in space. I think SpaceX is now more than 20 years old. You've been very open on your plans to return humankind to the moon. But you're not satisfied with that. We all know that you want to go one step further, landing humans on Mars. I'm wondering, how does Starlink fit in with these overall ambitions with SpaceX?
Yeah, so SpaceX was really started with the goal of trying to make life multiplanetary, or making as much progress as possible towards making life multiplanetary. In order to make life multiplanetary and become a spacefaring civilization, in the truest sense of the word, the rocket technology must be improved dramatically. In particular, the holy grail for rocketry is rapidly reusable, reliable rockets. RRRR, like a pirate. With Falcon 9, we've achieved, I think, the most efficient reusability of any rocket to date. We've got boosters now that have flown 10 times, and some that are slated to fly 20 or possibly 30 times. So this is a lot of reuse that we're getting. We're also now getting quite good at catching the nose cone fairing. And so when you look at the cost of the rocket, you've got about 60% of the cost, depending on how you count it, about 60% of the cost in the first stage, about 10% in the fairing. So that means we're recovering about 70% of the cost of the rocket And then you've got about 20% of the cost in the upper stage, which is lost every time, about 10% of the cost in the launch itself and the recovery and refurbishment process. So this is really a very good number for a rocket, but we still need to take this to another level with, that's why we have the Starship development, which is a much bigger rocket. It's the biggest rocket ever developed. It will have more than twice the thrust of the Saturn V moon rocket, and it's designed for full and rapid reusability. So this is with a 100-ton to orbit capability, possibly with further refinements, 150 tons to orbit, and with the ability to launch with zero expected refurbishment between flights, but like an airplane. Moreover, it uses lower cost propellant. So it's a 3.5 to 1 mass ratio of oxygen to fuel, and the fuel is liquid methane, which is the lowest cost fuel in the world. And the pressurant is autogenous oxygen and methane gas instead of helium with Falcon 9. So Falcon 9 uses helium. It uses rocket propellant grade jet fuel essentially, which is actually quite expensive, and helium for pressure, which is quite expensive. So the cost of propellant for Starship, even though it is much bigger, will be really comparable to the cost of propellant for Falcon 9, but it will have full and rapid reusability. So the crazy thing is that if things go as according to plan, we'll have a rocket with 100-ton to orbit capability that has a marginal cost per launch of around $2 million, which is less than our little Falcon 1 rocket that we started out with. And then with a rocket like with Starlink, or with Starship, I should say, when you add in orbital refilling, which really means that 2 Starships need to dock on orbit, one transferring propellant to the other, sort of like aircraft aerial refueling, but this is orbital refilling, primarily of oxygen. Then you can deliver over 100 tons to the surface of the moon or Mars, possibly 200 tons. So Starship is the first system that will be capable of building a base on the moon and a city on Mars.
And when will we see Starship, Elon?
Well, you can see its progress online right now. It's followed quite rigorously on the internet. In fact, often if I want to see what the latest thing is, I just go on the internet because it's being developed in South Texas right next to a public road. So number of members of the public have telephoto lenses pointed at our vehicle all the time. So we're hoping to do our first orbital launch attempt in the next few months, and we certainly will have a booster and a ship, an orbital capable booster and an orbital capable ship, and the orbital launch site will be ready within the next month or so.
Elon, I also understand that there may be a rocket launch later today in just a few hours.
Yes, this is another Falcon 9 launch. This is one of our transporter missions where we do a whole bunch of small satellites from mostly from third parties. So it's this is sort of like the equivalent of like a bus. Just many small satellites from many different parts of the world that are not ours are being launched into orbit, hopefully successfully later today.
Elon, we only have a couple of minutes left. Just as a kind of closing thoughts and reflections, Elon. I mean, all this week at MWC, it's obviously been great to come back to events in person. We've been talking a lot about leadership this week. And as a leader, you seem to be mission-driven. And I'm wondering what kind of criteria you look for when you take on new challenges, because you seem to go for challenges and not just necessarily opportunities. What kind of gets you really excited?
Well, yeah, I suppose so. What SpaceX is trying to do is to extend consciousness, the scope and scale of consciousness beyond Earth, and then what Tesla is trying to do is to sort of ensure that life is good on Earth, with sustainable energy, and Neuralink is sort of oriented towards long-term AI-human symbiosis. So, I mean, generally these companies are oriented towards like what actions can I think of to do to maximize the probability that the future is good, and that future includes an expansion of the scope and scale of consciousness. And this is based on my fundamental philosophy of, we don't really know what all the answers are or even what questions to ask. But if we're able to expand the scope and scale of consciousness, then we are better able to know what questions to ask about the answer that is the universe.
With that, Elon, sadly, we are out of time. It has been an absolute pleasure to talk with you today. We've been delighted to host you at MWC. Thank you so much for your time. I'd also like to say, obviously, we've been talking to you virtually. The invitation is there if you would ever like to come to MWC in person, perhaps February 22. We would love to host you again. Thank you so much for your time. Best of luck with the Starlink project and obviously the wider SpaceX program. Ladies and gentlemen, please give the biggest hand to Mr. Elon Musk. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Elon.